let's make some authentic 90s boom bap. Today I'm going to share tons of boom bap sampling tips, pattern building techniques, drum ideas, plus some plugin recommendations to get that authentic 90s boom bap sound. My name is Navie. I've made boom bap beats that have gotten millions of streams and have been used by tons of rappers, so let's just jump right in. When you make boom bap beats, you might start by looking for a sample. But today we're going to go in reverse and pre-build our beat before we go sample digging. This is an approach that many boom bap legends would take. They would start off by building the drums before even making a single chop of a sample. So why do this? Well, after reviewing thousands of beats, weak drums are a common problem in many producers' boom bap beats. And so by starting off with your drums, this can at least help you make sure your drums sound large and full right away. So let's start off with the hi-hats for this beat. Now already, here's a tip that can help. See if you can find a hi-hat that has a tail with noise in the sample. Let me see if I can find an example of what I mean. Not this one. Or this one. Oh, look who it is. My old friend Boom Bap Buddy. What do you want? Wow, really? You broke into my house and invaded my privacy to tell me that the brand new Boom Bap Box 2 is out now? Wow, thanks Boom Bap Buddy. Alright, so let's give this a try. You can leave now. Alright, let's use this pack. It's 100% royalty free, so you can make beats and post them online without ever having to worry. Click the link in the description box below if you're interested. If you're not, no worries, I'll still show you some really helpful tips for making boom bap regardless. So looking inside Boom Bap Box 2, this is the type of hi-hat I mean. If I just isolate the tail of this hi-hat and normalize it, you can hear exactly what I'm talking about. We have this layer of noise built into the tail of the sample. Now, why is using a hi-hat like this helpful? Well, let me show you. Here, I'm going to build a simple hi-hat pattern to start. As you can see with this pattern, we have the typical boom bap ideas that you've probably heard a million times, like unquantizing your drums so they're off grid and controlling the velocity. But here's how that noisy tail in your hi-hat can help your boom bap beats. If you take a transient processor and add it onto your hi-hats, this can get your drum patterns and your beats as a whole to just sound much more full, all by simply just cranking up one knob, the release knob. Take a listen. So what this is doing is taking that noisy tail from the hi-hat that I just showed you and making it louder for longer, which can be a great way to get your drum patterns as a whole to sound much more full and textured in your beat. And to the point that I made earlier, if I used a hi-hat that didn't have this extra bit of tail, like this hi-hat from a random pack on my computer, and I tried doing the same technique, you can hear this just isn't really doing much, and that's because there's no tail for this transient processor to grab onto and extend. So that's one boom bap drum pattern tip that you can consider using for your drum. Back to this beat, let's add in some kicks next. I like this one here, so let's build a quick kick pattern. And I want to show you another tip that can help your drums. I'm going to grab a snare from my pack. And lay down a simple pattern. Now, if you want your snares to have that big sound and take up a lot more space, reverb can be a great tool here. But here's a detail you might want to think about. Try not adding the reverb directly on the snare like this. So as you probably know, getting your drums to sound full and hit hard is a key to making boom bap beats. And depending on the reverb, this might actually take your snare and make it sound weaker. If, for example, your reverb is set at 20% mix, that means 20% of your snare is getting reverbed, leaving you with only 80% of that original hard-hitting snare. And so as a result, your snare will sound slightly weaker compared to the original dry signal. So what do? Try this instead. Take your snare and route it to a new mixer insert. Now you still have your original snare and you don't have to worry about it hitting less hard. And on this new insert, add reverb here at 100% mix. And just control the volume of how much of this reverby layer you want in your beat. So now you get the best of both worlds. This full hard hitting snare playing at 100%. Plus this layer of reverbed snare making our drums sound bigger, and we have much more control over it. Here's another tip for your drums. For most producers, when they want to create ghost snares, they simply use the exact same sound and just play it at a lower volume. Which is fine, but if you want to make a drum pattern that has a little bit more detail, here's what you can try. Duplicate or clone your snare out and use this to make a ghost snare. But first, change the start position of your drum sample. What this does is it slightly changes how the texture sounds, making it seem like you've sampled multiple drum sounds from a break. This adds more detail if that's something that you want. So here's our drum pattern now after using these ghost snares, plus layering an extra snare underneath my main one as well. A nice full sounding drum pad. Now that we have our drum pattern ready, let's start sampling. To find a sample, I'm just going to keep it simple. I will type in jazz samples for boom bap and look for a song somewhere here to sample. Now I know for many producers, they dig through sample after sample until they find the perfect loop or idea for a beat. I do this plenty, but this time I'm going to take a different approach and just audition ideas much faster. So let's just take this sample for instance. I have no idea what, if anything, is sampleable. I haven't listened through the full sample yet, but I know it has some great general sounds and textures that would fit a boom bap beat, so I'm just gonna give it a try. So I'm gonna load this into my sampler. But before I chop it up and start listening through it, I'm going to pre-treat this sample. Meaning before I do anything, I'm going to add effects to get this to sound more boom bappy. So this pre-treating or pre-building of my sample will just give me a better sense of knowing whether this can turn into a boom bap beat or not. Now when it comes to effects that are helpful for samples, this is one of my go-tos for boom bap, Decimort. This is a bit crushing tool that can replicate that sound of hardware samplers from the 90s, and I'm just going to mess with the frequency and filter settings until I get a nice balance and a good amount of bit crushing. And this is when having pre-built my drums can be an advantage as well. I'm gonna let my drums play while changing these settings. And this is giving me context and helping me decide how much bit crushing I want to introduce into this sample and what will create a nice balance with the drums. So now that I have my sample pre-treated, I'm going to start looking for chops that work while having my drums play once again. All right, I felt like I caught a decent idea in there. Maybe I'll use this idea, but honestly, I don't feel all that inspired by it. So I'm gonna go back into my list of samples here and just quickly audition something else. Let's just throw this in and quickly cycle through this to see if there's another idea in here that I like better. So I'm just gonna simply bring this into the exact same sampler that is routed to the exact same pre-treating effects, and let's just do the exact same thing. Alright, I think I found a good idea here. Now, while I do like this melodic idea from these chops, it does feel like more is needed. But there's something that I noticed in the sample. There are these chops that sit in a lower frequency earlier on in the sample. So let's try adding these alongside my current chops to make this sound more full. And so if I layer them in, now the sample is taking up slightly more space in the beat in the lower pockets of frequencies. Having said that, I do think this beat still needs a variety of textures and not just a crunchy sounding Fender Rhodes for the entirety of the beat. So I'm gonna go into my pack and find some boom bap instruments that would fit this idea. I think some malleted instruments would work well. So let's see what we got. I like this one here. And here's a quick tip: if you want your ideas and sounds that you build to fit your sample, playing the instrument that you're using like how it would actually be played in real life can help. So in this example, if you watch videos of how jazz musicians use these instruments, you'll notice they have this really unique grip of the mallets, where they play notes either 1 or 2 at a time with this grip. So when I build my pattern, I will use this same technique. Next, let's add in a classic sound that shows up in many 90s boom bap beats, which is a layer of horns. For my pack, I hired a horn player to play tons of riffs. And each one has its own unique feel and articulation. Giving me tons to choose from. But with this beat, I don't need anything too complex, just a simple stab. So I will use this sample here from the pack. Do some heavy EQing. This is meant to mimic how 90s producers would have to heavily EQ and filter out a horn from a sample to try to isolate it. Then I'll add some delay. I do want a smaller texture to throw in as an extra layer, so I will go into my folder of layers. This is an assortment of ideas that I've built that you can use either as ear candy or as beat starters. So let's see what's in here. So I'm gonna add this layer in and then finally wrap it up with a simple bass line to finish my authentic 90s boom bap beat. If you're interested in checking out this new pack of mine, Boom Bap Box 2, click the link in the description box below or this little box next to me. Like and subscribe, and I hope you learned a lot in this video. Bye for now, and make sure to check out Boom Bap Box 2.